Good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday Mull for Thursday, the 14th of September. With McShane, working our way through 2 Samuel. Today we read chapter 10. It begins with a story that the king of the Ammonites dies, and he had treated David kindly. So David sends a delegation to his son and heir to express sympathy with them. And as they arrive, the nobles and leadership of the Ammonites, they turn to the king and they say to Hanun, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending men to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So upon their advice, Hanun apprehends the men, shaves off half their beard, cuts their robes off sort of at the middle of their buttocks and sends them on their way humiliated. And as a result of that behavior, David then raises an army and they go to battle, which the Ammonites eventually lose. And as I read that, I thought, here were people, they weren't trying to provoke a battle. At least one would assume not. They thought they were being smart. They thought they were being clever. But they were not. They were not wise. They were making all sorts of assumptions. That don't appear to have investigated things terribly carefully at all. And they gave advice. And then Hanun followed their advice. And it made me wonder, whose advice do we listen to? What voices are there around us and part of our hearing that we listen to? And are we always careful about which voices we give credence to? And when we speak to people, do we rush in and air our views, or do we stop and think and consider and weigh up the options and tread a little more carefully before we give advice? And so, again, a human book with a human situation. And in this whole chapter, it doesn't really mention God at all. This is the politics of the day playing itself out. But even that is part of the bigger story of God working in David's life and in David's kingdom. And so as we go through life, not everything will be sort of biblical, out of the Bible, sort of prayers in church. Very often it's going to be life that happens in the world, in the business place, in the shopping centers, on the golf course, wherever it is. And it's there that we're going to need to be discerning and careful, and sometimes a little slow to act as we consider and tread carefully, and be very aware that sometimes the voices that there are and the advice that is given may not necessarily be good advice. So be challenged in the advice you give and in that advice you listen to, and always rely ultimately on good, godly people to give you good, godly advice. Be blessed.